Captain Jay Seeley from the Yakima Police Department in the house this morning. Good morning, Capitan.
Good morning. How you doing?
Very good.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
And by being here, we are all 6 feet apart. I just want everyone to know.
Thank you.
Socially
That's
distanced.
Right. That's
Thank
right.
you. Well, welcome in this day of, just leave half your salary at the door, defund the police, cut it by half. You see what's happening. I know that you folks have brotherhood and connection with what goes on in other jurisdictions around the state. First of all, just unthinkable horror from Bothell. So sorry to have to even include that in the conversation this morning. But you also see what cities like Seattle are doing, and the battle. They've got a battle now between what the mayor wants to do to reduce the police versus what the council and everybody else wants to do. What is that? You've got, how many years in biz have you got?
25 years.
All right. So if you had 5 years in, it might make you rethink a few things, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it really would. And first of all, our hearts go out to the Bothell Police Department and all their families and everyone impacted by that tragedy over there. I'll tell you this, it's an interesting concept with this defunding the police. It's you're seeing major city chiefs and up and leaving their agencies, just quitting. You're seeing officers retire early. And again, that is out of concern for their longevity, I would assume. And I'll tell you, it's funny because the first thing that happens when they start defunding or reducing police budgets, police chiefs aren't going to reduce the personnel right away. They're going to reduce training and equipment. And it's funny because the public says, well, I want you to hire a higher caliber officer with better training and more equipment. Well, it's in direct conflict of defunding then. If you defund those agencies, the first thing that the chiefs are going to cut are those two things. They're going to get rid of the equipment, and then they're going to cut training, because those are the budgets that they can move around a little bit. Personnel, they have to have personnel. We have to enforce the laws, and we have to investigate the laws. But other than that, that's exactly what they're going to be defunding, which is in direct conflict of what the public wants. So if you start defunding an agency, that's what you can expect.
Well, there's not a lot of gray matter being applied to those circumstances. The unintended consequences aren't even being considered, in my opinion, by some jurisdictions. It's just drunk with power. Drunk with a newfound capability, this euphoria of we can make things happen, and people will bow to our demands. Let's start with this, because nobody likes to have a cap over their shoulder until you need them, you dipstick. But that's, I guess, to be determined. But it really is a shocking time in our country to see so many predominantly urban centers doing this. There's a price to be paid when you stack people up like rats. There really is. We are blessed here to be able to look around and see open space and not concrete and fresh air and everything else. So it does have an impact, I think. On
and so far, we haven't caved to political pressure over here.
Yeah, have you had any calls, any talk about defunding or prioritizing or anything like that in the department?
Well, we've seen. On the minority, we've seen a few discussions about defunding the police, but over here it's just not gaining that type of traction over here. Thankfully, we have a ton of support in our community. That's been very helpful for us. We're just not seeing what's happening nationwide. And Yakima's always obviously a little bit behind as the nation moves. Everything seems like it moves from the East Coast to the West Coast, and so we're a little bit behind on that. But I don't think we're going to see that here. We have a lot of support here in Yakima.
With the officers retiring and geez, with all this stuff going on, first of all, was your father an officer?
He was not. No,
he was not. You've got a son.
Yes, I do.
How old is your son?
My son's 15.
So, he's thinking about what he wants to do.
Yeah.
30 years ago, would you have told him, hey, gung-ho, man, I want you to follow me in this position in policing? And would you have done that 30 years ago?
Absolutely.
Maybe? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic. It's a noble, honorable position. It's an absolute fantastic job. I would have advocated for him to follow in my footsteps.
Today,
I would not.
Oh.
I think the risk versus the reward. I know you and I have talked about this before. It's so dangerous. And you wake up today and look what happened in Bothell. It's just, When you defund the police and you depower the police, you empower the criminal. And now you're starting to see what happens when you do that. Look what happened over in Capitol Hill.
You empower the criminal. Yeah, that's right. Capitol Hill chop zone.
So I would not advocate for my son to follow my footsteps at this point.
Even conversations about defunding the police speaks to a level of disregard or unimportance.
Yeah.
Whether it actually happens or not, that has an undermining effect on the confidence of citizenry and on the boosting of confidence on the bad guys. Because there are bad guys out there just watching and waiting. I mean, that's the bottom line. We have bad people waiting to do, and when the scales are tilted their way, i.e. not as many police and not general support for the police, then they're free to move about and do what they do. And
I agree.
The rest of us pay the price.
You're right. I think what's going to be really interesting is to see, let's see what nationwide it looks like for recruiting and retention for police officers.
Yeah.
Let's see if we actually have the interest anymore. And you know, when the economy is going well, you just don't see quite the interest in law enforcement anyways. I don't see the public sector. When the economy goes down, people start leaning towards the public sector more and getting into public service. But let's just see what happens nationwide for recruiting and retention with all of this scrutiny. I call it hyper scrutiny of police actions. I mean, can you imagine in your job if every time you move, somebody was filming it and scrutinizing every single move you made?
I do. I follow them around, and I got 2 phones full of pictures. But you're absolutely right. You are in the petri dish under the microscope.
Yeah, yeah. So what, have you been talking to any of the young officers? What are they saying?
You know, we talked to them quite a bit, and they don't know any different because they don't understand what it used to be like when we were policing in different times. And so for them, this is the norm. And I guess for all of us, this will become the new norm until we figure out, kind of get a baseline on where we're headed. But, you know, they're motivated. They love it. They still like their job. The chief and I and other command members of the department talk to our new officers all the time.
Good.
And because we strongly believe in employee wellness.
Right on. And you know, thank you to so many of you that have done great things for the officers in the last 3 or 4 weeks even. I mean, I'm just watching your Facebook post. I watched some of the Facebook posts from the county sheriff's office as well, and people just been giving you all kinds of stuff to fatten you up.
Yeah.
I noticed that.
Oh, yeah. Yes, they have.
But yeah, just really neat. Just reaching out. So, you know, hey, man, so to so many, from so many of in the community that I speak for, thank you so much for the safety, for when you guys are doing at night, and I hear you driving by and I'm laying in bed and I know everything's okay in my neighborhood and all the good stuff that you guys do. Really appreciate it. You know, you've been in here before and we've talked about designated crisis responders, and so those are mental health professionals that ride with the officers. You get a call from the Union Gospel Mission. They're able to help you, maybe talk to a homeless person or whatever.
Yeah.
And you guys, boy, you love that, right?
Oh, we love it. It's such a valuable program for us. You know, we started this back in 2016 out of the True Blood grant funding. And I'll tell you, we started off with one mental health professional at the police department, and they would ride around with the officer. And it was such a successful program, we've actually added 3 more. So 24 hours a day, we have 16 hours worth of coverage. And it's just fantastic. So every time we go to a call where it's a homeless person or maybe somebody suffering from mental health problems, we bring that mental health professional right with us in the police car, right to that call, and they deal with them. And it's fantastic, you know. And not only that, but they provided us with training. They give us, you know, crisis response training. They give us de-escalation training. We have one assigned to our SWAT team. And I tell you, it's just been such a valuable service for us. We love it. We absolutely love it.
It just seems like now there's a potential there, not to defund an officer, but and not to ask for more tax dollars to fund a new unit. But I mean, it would just. What would you think if you could put 4 designated crisis responders in a car to respond to homeless issues, mental issues? I mean, what do you think about that? Would that work?
Well, we think it's a great idea. In fact, we would certainly be open to that. We do think it would work. I know that, we talked about this, but St. Petersburg, Florida is trying that exact same thing. And so we're watching them very closely to see how that program works for them. But Yeah, in law enforcement, what are we good at? We're good at enforcing criminal laws. But what you see us doing now is we're the homeless police, we're the mental health counselors, we're the drug counselors. We got to get back to doing what we're really good at, which is enforcing criminal laws.
But every time we talk about this, then someone chimes in and says, "Oh yeah, well, what if they pull the gun out? Then how are they going to protect? How are the? What about you'd have 4 designated crisis responders dead or something like that? I mean, do you arm those people? Or how do you protect those people in those situations then?"
Well, that's a great question. So if you arm them, then you train them, and then you come along with the liability. St. Petersburg has taken the route that they're not going to arm them. They're sending them out in some type of uniform, so they're easily identifiable, but they're not going to be armed. So that is a good question. Safety-wise, do you arm them or do you not arm them?
Yeah,
that's a great question.
What do you think? What do you think?
Well, if it was me, I'd want to be armed. I'd want some type of protection if I was going out, because some of these people obviously don't want to be talked to. They don't want people around them, and they may shoot. That's a great question.
Man, oh man. Well, I just it just seems like the call to defund. Durkin wants to in Seattle. Durkin wants to reduce the 2021 budget by about $76 million by transferring a number of non-officer functions out of the department rather than cutting funding. And maybe opening up some funding. So I'm thinking maybe that would create a designated crisis unit, something like that. It could work. And
that makes more sense to me, and that sounds a lot better than defunding or cutting a police budget.
Yeah,
let's just reallocate some of these resources we have and move people into different positions. That makes more sense to me.
It's better for the police, I believe, and it is responsive to what the concerns, at least some of the concerns expressed by the community. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there that don't want to see blue at all, but there are people out there that are concerned for escalations that occur based on training, mindset, approach, inherent bias by people against the police, all the things that can go sideways just for showing up, right? In a situation where there's not necessarily a crime involved. So it doesn't give them everything that some of the more extreme ones want, but it does take a step towards making a more efficient use of our tax dollars to help solve the problems that are there, right?
Absolutely. And we certainly would welcome that opportunity. We'd love to try it. And I think you're probably going to start seeing us move in that direction. I mean, we're going to sit back and watch and see what happens with some of these other programs. But we're certainly open to that. I know the chief and I have discussed that at length. We'll see.
Captain, always a great conversation with you. Thanks for checking in. We'll check in with you next month. And until then, stay safe. And thanks for coming in this morning. Appreciate it. Captain Jay Seeley from the Yakima Police Department. Have a great day.
Thank you, gentlemen.